Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a sort of an impromptu show. I know we don't usually do this on Monday night, but a very big friend of the channel and a legendary, just a person. I don't even have the words. Mr. Jim Shooter has passed away at the age of 72.
73.
73. Sorry. Yeah. We just wanted to come on and remember Jim and tell some stories, and felt that he was worth acknowledging. He's a big personal friend of ours. Been on the show many times, done shows with us. We worked with everybody who's worked with him. Brittany was the last person who was kind of helping him out, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to attend Heroes Con a couple weeks ago, and so we didn't get to see him then. I did get to see him about a little less than a month ago. He came to town for a convention. I was able to see him and say hi, so I'm very glad that we did. But once again, we're not trying to make this a bummer. We just wanted to come out and recognize what a great person he is, and tell some stories, and see if anybody else wanted to chime in and kind of give people an outlet to talk about how great Jim was, or maybe if you had problems with him, get those things out now. He wasn't always liked by and loved by everybody, but he was a character. Listen, I got stories. I got a great story I'm going to tell later about Jim being ornery, because he always could be ornery. But I'm going to go back over here to Ken and have him, just tell his feelings a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sad. I mean, it's been a long time coming. The last few weeks have kind of had a feeling something was happening. They kind of went off the grid. I was hoping to see him at Heroes. I spoke to somebody close to Jim about 2 weeks before Heroes. I called, and Jim said, answer the phone, it's Ken Carson. So he wasn't talking to me. He was yelling from the other room. But yeah, it's a sad. Yeah. Jim was, he was such an icon, and it was such an honor to have even met him, let alone worked with him for the last 3 years, taking him to conventions and things like that. And we certainly had a lot of fun. We had some ups and downs, a couple punches thrown here and there, and
not by Jim though.
Yeah. So it was just it's a sad day. I've known Jim. I've known Jim was sick for about a year and a half. So having spoken to a friend of mine who's in the medical industry, who actually knew something about what was going on with Jim, he kind of told me then that the survival rate was pretty low. So, but Jim and I last year, we had a phone call, and there was a lot of we said a lot of things that we wanted to say to each other. We said our goodbyes in a sense. He made some comments to me. I made some comments to him about how we felt about each other, and it was nice. So I'll always have that. At least I have closure in that sense. I mean, I didn't get a chance to see. The last time I saw Jim was, I think, last year at Hershey Comic-Con. But I spoke to him a few times on the phone after that, and it's a real sad day in the 4C family, because he was definitely part of the 4C family.
That's one thing that always struck me. Like, I knew obviously you had talked to me about some of the things going on with Jim, just kind of generalities without sharing his information. And it surprised me then, after you had told me that, I was still seeing him announced for cons, and he was still making the effort to get out there and do things with the fans and signings and stuff.
Yeah, Jim, he loved his fans. I mean, he didn't go to conventions to make money. He would always say to me, that's your problem. My problem, I'm here to meet the fans. That's what it was all about for Jim. For him to sit there and tell stories and regale of just everything. I learned so much from him too. I mean, there were so many people who would come to the table and want to do like a portfolio review. and to hear him tell them things that they needed to do or what he was looking for as an editor, it was really amazing. And I keep all of those things in my head, especially him and Bill Morrison also. Just like I said, I learned so much from him, and just the stories he told, and just the inside information that he would give us about things that happened during the years in the bullpen and all those things. And Jim was a great guy. I'm going to miss him a lot.
Yeah, and you're right. He didn't care. He loved when he got to a show. He had a way that he liked to put all of his stuff out, and it was sort of like a tale of his life. And he put that stuff out there. A lot of guys, when they do these shows, they would fill it with stuff to sell or stuff they could move or stuff, product or this or, it was all he just wanted to talk to people. That's all he wanted to do. He didn't want to, like, that was one of the big things with us is he used to like to sign autographs, back when the shows would pay for him to come in, he would sign for free because he didn't have to, like, once again, he was just there to see but when we, in order to do shows, when people stopped paying for him, he couldn't pay out of pocket to come. So he started working with other people, and then he started, he just didn't care about any of that money stuff. He's like, I don't care about that stuff. Just you handle it. All I want to do is talk to the people and just, and he could talk, and he could tell stories. And I heard a million stories from him, but I got to tell you, every single time I saw him, I heard a new story I'd never heard before, and that's how many stories he had. We did a show one night on here where I just grabbed a stack of comics.
I remember I was on that show.
Yeah, and I just peeled through, and I just said, "What can you tell me a story about this person?"
Just name a creator's name,
and he would just tell me a story. And yeah, he was.
We did that when we were driving home from Jeff and I took Jim to a comic book store signing
in Tampa.
And, we were driving back, and I said, Jim, Dan Jurgens. And he just started telling stories about Dan. He was just naming people off the top of our heads, and he had a story about everybody.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Murdoch shares a story. He said, got a chance to meet Jim Shooter for the first time in Philly when they were launching Defiant. Literally bigger than life guy, inspired people.
Yeah. Yeah, he used to call himself Scorched Earth. He felt that he was a pariah in the industry, that nobody liked him, and
he always got that feeling when you'd talk to him too. He didn't feel. He
didn't. That's why I think he liked the fans so much, because the fans would, they give him the adoration and stuff. I think he felt within the industry he was viewed that way, but I don't know that he was.
Yeah,
I really don't.
No, and there's some people that obviously had different feelings about him, and some people, I don't think anybody can deny just the talent. I mean, when you're writing stories for DC at 13, 14 years old, he's the first guy who ever thought, hey, why don't we race the Flash for a Superman? Like that, he was the first person to tell that story.
14.
Yeah, you look at that now and you're like, oh yeah, of course that would. Yeah, well, nobody had thought of it before then, even though the characters had been around for over 30 years.
Yeah.
And the whole, like, coming up with all the things that the Secret Wars, and that's one of the things that one of my biggest things. And obviously it's minor in the world of being human, but I would have loved if he could have seen that movie that's supposed to come out in 2027, I think.
I said to Jeff last year, I said, damn, if he could only make it to see Secret Wars.
Yeah. I just thought he deserved that. But once again, he knew it was coming. He knew everything that he got. I said, I love when we were doing that signing. I said, it's my great story. I'm just going to tell about Jim. We went to a Subway, and this is the kind of guy, Jim he just knew what he wanted, and he went in there. So he goes into Subway, and we're standing there, and he's just getting some food while we're waiting for the signing. And he's like, he goes to the guy at the counter, and he's like, what would you like? And Jim points to him and goes, I want that. And just points to the picture behind the counter. And the kid, not understanding, was just like, do you want the BLT? Do you want the VID? He said, I want that. I want that looks like that. And I had to go in and I had to say, I was like, well, Jim, that's just a picture. It looks like a turkey sub. So I go to the kid. I'm like, what Jim wants is a turkey sub. And I looked and I was like, with lettuce and tomato and mayonnaise and cheese. And I had to reel it off to him because Jim didn't have time for that. He just said, you know what? You got a picture of something that looks good. I want that. And that's what I want.
Exactly.
Want the special. Sir, we don't have a special.
Yeah, exactly. It was just literally a background picture of a turkey sandwich behind the Subway counter, to just promote subs. It wasn't a specific sub. It was just a pretty picture.
Like try the number 3 today.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the kid didn't know. He's like, "Well, do you want it? Do you want a turkey? Do you want?" It's like I wanted to tell the kid, I'm like, just turn around and see what that is, and that's what he wants. But it was just stuff like that. It was just, even just talking to him a few weeks ago, he was talking. We were talking about doing a signing with him and doing something and for Heroes, and he was like, tell Ken I need the specifics, and he's like, I don't care about the money. He's like, just tell me where I have to be and what I got to do. And that's all he just wanted. He didn't care about the money. He just wanted to go and do the thing and where to meet and where we were going to do stuff. And, we were very lucky. I was lucky to have several different dinners with Jim, and he loved his wine and he loved regaling with the hostess or the waitress and it was, like I said, I could tell a million stories, but read some of these.
Stevie B's House of Collectibles says the man completely changed my impression of him that had mostly been created by creators who fled Marvel during his time as EIC. I met him at a con on Long Island and found him genuine and engaging.
Yeah, Jim used to say that, when he became editor-in-chief, he got a call after his first month there from the printing house that published that actually printed the comic books, and they said to him that was the first time that Marvel had been on time in a decade or something like that.
With all their books, yeah.
With all their books, yeah, because he cracked the whip. He expected people to do their jobs, and he held them accountable to it. And a lot of people didn't like it, and I've spoken to a lot of creators, and I've never personally ran across anybody who had any ill feelings against Jim.
Well, he made a lot of people a lot of money with how he treated creators.
I mean, he did things like, he told me a story about when he first got to Marvel, when he was first with Marvel. He realized that there was no health insurance, so he helped him get health insurance. He helped them get publication royalties to the creators and the writers, which he said he went up to the big wig. They were owned by some big book publishing company, and he fully expected to go in there and get thrown out or fired or something like that. When he sat down and said, the comic book guys aren't getting paid royalties for what they're doing. And the guy said, are you kidding me? Well, they should be. It all changed. And then he did a lot of things for the industry, for creators. And I hope he knew that at the end of the day that, this kind of stuff is going to happen. We're going to remember Jim. We're going to revere his life and career. Of course, there were some issues that were along the way, and lawsuits and things like that he had to deal with, and but at the end of the day, his mark on the industry is solidified forever.
Yeah, definitely, substantial, and you can tell all of us who are on, anybody who's on Facebook right now, it's just flooded with people remembering Jim. One of my favorite, you were talking about dinner. We were at Lexington Comic-Con with no, it wasn't Lexington Comic-Con. It was Great Lakes Comic-Con. It was Bill. I was with Bill Morrison, and Jim was there. And we had only done, I think, one show with him at that point. So I knew him, but I didn't know him too well. But we got the chance to go out to dinner with him. And Bill and I went to an Italian restaurant, and we were there for about 4 or 5 hours. I don't know if I said a single word. I just let Bill and Jim talk about the comic book industry from the inside, about editor-in-chiefs and about how Marvel almost acquired the rights for Simpsons publication. Bill would have been working under Jim Shooter if that had happened back in the early 90s before Bongo got started. But yeah, here's a picture of us from that show, that Great Lakes Comic-Con that year. After we got some time to hang out. So
Ken, you look like just a kid.
I got black hair now. I don't have black But growing up, we all had friends and things like that. And there was a group of about 4 of us who read comic books, and one of my friends actually came to Heroes last year, and I told him, I said, let's go talk. And he couldn't believe we were going to go talk to Jim Shooter, and I was like, well, this is what I do now. So his name, a good friend of mine, his name is Rob, and here's us. We're here we are with Shooter at Heroes last year, and at this point, I knew Jim was sick. You can see he's starting to lose weight a little bit here. But it was great for me to have that full circle moment with somebody that I we used to see Jim's name in every comic book we picked up, because I didn't read that DC nonsense. So for him and I to be with Jim at that point was it was cool. It was cool. Like I said, I'm very sad that he's passed. But looking back for me personally with Jim, I don't have any regrets or anything. We said the things we needed to say. We knew how we felt about each other, and it was good stuff. It was good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a million things that we could say about him. There's a ton of interviews that we did with on the 4C. If anybody wants to see any of those, once again, every single one has new and different stories. So anytime anybody wants to tune in,
try to rebroadcast the first interview we did with him, Jeff.
All right.
Yeah.
You should.
Yeah, I'm downloading it right now.
I know we have the shorts of the one where me and Jeff are talking to him, I think, and he does the auction story about the Kirby.
Oh yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, we once again
a great story.
Yeah, where he wasn't going to let Jack Kirby's piece go for cheap, so he bid like
he had a credit card. He was like, I didn't have a bunch of money.
I didn't have much money, but I got a credit card.
I had my first credit card.
My favorite Jim story was when he went out to an Italian restaurant with who was it?
Vince Coletta.
Oh, Vince Coletta. Yeah, wow.
And they saw a mobster in the corner.
No.
Vince Coletta, and it was Vince Coletta
with
and
Stan Lee.
Lee.
He told Jim the story.
And he told Jim that he said that there was a mobster in the corner, and he asked Vince.
You know what mobster it was, right? Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly.
Paul Castellano.
Yeah. So he went over and they asked if he could meet Stan Lee, and he said yeah. So Stan Lee comes over and he walks over and he goes, "Don't shoot."
Yeah. So
that's all he said.
I mean, my God, come on, Stan, read the room.
Read the room, Stan. What's going on with you?
Oh my God.
Jason V says, "Man, another comics legend is past. I only met him a couple of times. His impact on comics will be felt forever."
Yeah, I mean, anybody who's around, my age, everybody remembers playing with those Secret Wars action figures, because it was the first time there was any action figures with the Marvel that you could actually do stuff with, that were the same size as like the Star Wars figures and the G.I. Joe figures, and those books that came out. I mean, I'm lucky enough I had Jim sign my personal copy from when I was a kid of of the Secret Wars, but this was the thing, and they created this story just to sell the toys, and guys, great art, and just great, and of course everybody knows it introduced the Black Spider-Man, and it's just it's ingrained. Like when I got to meet Jim finally, and then when I was lucky enough to call him my friend, and when he'd recognize me and know my name, which is just the stupidest thing in the world. It just blows my mind. If I could go back to when I was a kid in 1984 playing with, action figures, knowing the guy who, created the story for these action figures.
He created because of the toys. That's the crazy part.
Yeah.
The toys were already being made, and they said to him, "Hey, listen, write a story around it." And he just
to know what he needed to do to launch those toys and to make it. Like, and not just that, like we've already talked about the royalties, the profit sharing, he pumps so many good ideas into Marvel, and for even the people he didn't get along with, it didn't matter. He still gave them opportunities and put them on books where they could be successful. It's incredible. His story is incredible. Murdoch says, turn Marvel into the successful company it became. You felt it when he was ousted from Valiant. Defiant had great concepts that never got a chance to run. Broadway just didn't have his heart in it.
This
Yeah.
this is a piece that I have hanging on my wall. This is actually a gift from Jeff. This is Star. This is a page from Star Brand #1. This is the first page.
Oh wow!
It's technically the first page of Star Brand, where you see the character Star Brand. But John Romita said that he made him look like Jim, because Star Brand was blonde.
He was from Pittsburgh.
He was from Pittsburgh. He was tall, so he kind of drew him like Jim Shooter.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, and I got Jim to sign it, of course.
Yeah,
we saw him in John. But yeah, this is like one of my prized possessions, and because I actually, although the new universe wasn't well received at the time, Starbrand actually was a pretty good book.
Did pretty good.
And I loved it. It was like one of my favorite things when this comic came out. I was all over that new universe stuff until I read a few of them. But I did like Starbrand. So yeah, but Jim, man, he had so many great stories about.
Yeah, well, just the Secret Wars thing. The reason why Jim wrote that was because if he gave the story to the X-Men writers, then the Avengers writers would have been pissed. And if he gave it to the Avengers writers, the X-Men writers would have been pissed. Oh, he told
the story about when what was it, issue 3, the X-Men lose to Spider-Man,
right? And
somebody came, one of the creators came and said, "The X-Men aren't going to lose to Spider-Man." He's like, "Why not?"
Yeah. That was a great thing. And he talked about how he wanted to use, he said, I want to use, he talked to John Byrne or something. He said, I want to use the Fantastic Four in this book. And he's like, so I'm going to take him there. And he's like, well, what can, and John wasn't very happy with that. He didn't like it. And he said, well, what can I do to make you happy? He goes, well, I want to put She-Hulk in the Fantastic Four. And he's like, done. I'll just make an excuse for the Thing to stay in Battle World, and then you can put She-Hulk in the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff he did.
Yeah.
That's how She-Hulk became part of the Fantastic Four in the comics, was just because of a little inside deal, which he didn't have to do. He was the editor. He could just do what he wanted, but he wanted to make everybody, obviously looking back on it, people say, all the people he pissed off, but he really was trying to make everybody happy. He was trying to get people their art. He was trying
he had reasons for doing the things he did.
And Marvel was never more successful than it was, in my opinion, during his tenure.
It was definitely the rise of Marvel Comics when Jim was editor-in-chief in the 80s there. The Secret Wars stuff and just everything. You think about the rise, the X-Men, the popularity of the X-Men, and all that stuff. That all came out in the 80s when Jim was. Jimmy even. People might not even notice, but when the Thanksgiving Day Parade debuted the Spider-Man balloon, Jim actually helped design it.
Right. And he talked about that when he was on 4C, one of the many times he was on 4C. Jason Harris says, I loved reading his editorials / responses on the mailbag pages of the comics I read.
Yeah.
Legion says, most people, I don't want to be the bad guy. Jim, hold my beer.
It's very true.
Listen, he spoke his mind. He wasn't shy about it, and didn't apologize for it, and just said what he said.
Yeah,
he did what he did.
Called people out for their work ethic, which is why I think you're right, Jeff. That's what made him so many enemies when he came in, but he got the books coming out on time and held people responsible.
Yeah, exactly. And one of my favorite stories that he told during that dinner that we had with Bill Morrison, I think we spent 3 of those 5 hours talking about inkers for whatever reason. And he told a story about I want to say it was Gene. It was Coletta, Vince Coletta. When it was either him or Sinnott, I can't remember. I think it was John Byrne did his first Fantastic Four. And he came running to Jim's office. He said, he erased all the heads. And he was like, well, let's find out why. And he called in whoever the inker was, and he said, why'd you erase the heads? And he said, because the necks were this long. So he erased all the heads and redrew them. He was explaining that, sometimes inkers do those kind of things.
One of the shows I was on with Jim here, Vince Coletta, of course, got brought up because that's a common name to ask Jim about. Yeah, I will not. I just saw that comment as I was thinking about it. Hey, Becker, read the Vince Coletta letter. If there is ever someone to express the importance of Jim, it was Vince's letter about Marvel letting him go. No, we won't reread that letter, but that's we all know what it's in it. And but no, like, he defended Vince because obviously, one, they're friends, but two, he had a lot of respect for Vince's role. And it wasn't something I always thought about, but he's like, if Vince Coletta was the anchor on a book, most likely it was because that book was behind schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Vince was the guy you brought in to get it done in a day.
And a lot of people think very poorly of Vince because they feel like, a lot of the stuff is like he would black out backgrounds, and he would simplify stuff that was like, especially a lot of Kirby stuff. It was very detailed. Not so much when they were on.
But it had to get done.
But yeah, they had to get the book out. And even though Kirby did this incredible art, like it wasn't not going to be able to get out on time if he had to ink everything that was on there. So it was a job back then. It wasn't just art. Even Sorry. No, you're good. And that's and then there's once again tons of stories like that. With people. With I remember Ditko. I remember telling stories about Ditko and giving Ditko a job, telling him he could come back anytime he wanted to work, and and he ended up doing a couple things.
Like, did it slowly because he knew if he just came out and said, "Hey, we'd like to have you back," he'd say no, like, I'm not coming back.
Right.
But he just kept throwing it out there kind of gently.
Yeah.
Stevie B's House of Collectibles says flipping through the portfolio that he brought to shows was like taking a stroll in a tabletop museum.
It was the stuff that he had in there. He had an amazing piece that he was gifted by the late George Perez.
Sorry.
Ken is blowing up. Ken, there's a mute
button. I got this new phone. It won't stop.
Think about the work rate at the time, though, Legion. It wasn't just one book coming out. Jack had like every book. And he did work fast, but not when he had to do every book.
Yeah. And you have to remember that it was like, Vince and Kirby on like Thor was just gold. But it was, Vince, when he was doing some other stuff, like they had to pump out this stuff, and everything was so detailed, and the other inkers couldn't keep up. And then, and Vince was inking several different books, and it just, once again, we're not here to debate about whether Vince Coletta was a great inker or not, but he was definitely, Jim always said, this like he gets a bad rap,
that's what Jim said. I mean, he defended him pretty.
Oh yeah,
matter of factly.
Yeah, but I mean, I wish Bill was here to tell the story. But Bill mentioned something about Vince, something he heard about Vince. Not even And Jim literally stood up and went, "You don't know Vince Gray!" Like screaming in Bill's face. Bill was like, I'm just
he rewarded the loyalty of that letter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it Murdoch says Jack was crazier than John Byrne ever was when it came to output. People look at Byrne and wonder the drugs. Listen, there's guys like that can put out, and Jack put out a lot of art, like really, really fast. Byrne was the same way. I think Bagley was working on 4 books at a time at one point. There's guys who can do that when they're pumping, but once again, it's great that Jack did all that detail and stuff. But once again, these were jobs, guys, and they had to get out there. So that's why, he always counted on Vince.
Let's talk about another, some more Jim stories,
Yeah.
And, I had it in my head a second ago. I think it was the first time I did a show with you guys and him. Oh, now I lost it.
That's all right. It'll come back around. But if anybody else out there, like I said, we're going to try to read as much stuff as we can. But like I said, guys, this is just a show for people to get stuff out if they want to say something, if they want, any experiences they had and just remembrances. We just felt like, we were around and once we found out it happened, it was very, jarring to us. And we just, we didn't want to just talk amongst ourselves. We wanted to make sure we gave the 4C family an outlet to kind of talk it out. Yeah, I mean, I remember pushing Jim around in a wheelchair at MegaCon, making sure.
Bacon did that. MegaCon too, dragging Jim around. I dislocated my shoulder carrying that heavy ass bag with all his shit in it.
Yeah. Well, he was at Richmond a few years ago, and Bacon and I went out. My friend of mine owns a restaurant in Richmond, and we all went out to dinner. Bacon, Jim, Brittany, and I, and we had a lovely dinner and hung out, and there was somebody playing live music, and Jim, wanted to go over and give the woman who was playing guitar some money, and so he that was one of the last things we did before he left. He walked all the way over there with his cane and. Just to give the woman, throw $20 in her tip jar, just because that's the kind of guy he was. He just, he acknowledged everybody, and whether sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad, but nobody was small to him. Everybody had a job, and what he sometimes would feel like he was talking at you, but he really wasn't. He just wanted to make sure that his point was getting across.
He was very direct. He expected things, and if they weren't getting done, he wanted to know why they weren't getting done. And I can remember at I think the last MegaCon, there was wheelchair issues. Somebody actually stole our wheelchair.
Yeah, and
I had to go all the way across the entire convention hall. I had to rent a wheelchair with my own money and drive it back. And when I drove back, he was sitting in a wheelchair because I had left my phone, I think, at the table or something like that. So no one could get a hold of me to tell me that they had come with the chair. And
somebody had,
yeah. But I mean, that's, we wanted to make sure Jim was comfortable. I mean, we watched him go from a cane to a wheelchair, over the last couple of years. Of course, like I said, we knew he was sick. That's
one of those things that I wanted to mention before I forget was I remember when we first found out he was sick, and it was one of those things where only a couple people knew, and when he told Ken that that the very seriousness of his illness and only a handful of people knew, he said, and he told Ken, he's like, you Ken, and by the way, you tell the people that you think need to know. He's like, I trust you with that. You tell the people who, it's like, I'm telling you, and I'm not telling you, don't tell anybody. I'm telling you that who needs to know, and I'll trust whoever you tell to tell. So, and I was among those people that he was, trusted enough to find out. And I was very honored by that. That we had that kind of relationship.
Yeah, the story that I heard was, when things were going, so when he got diagnosed and things weren't going so well, he said he told his family, you can tell three people. You can tell John Beatty, you can tell Jim Starlin, Steranko. You can tell Jim Steranko, John Beatty, and Ken Carson. He said only family. And then he told me that I could share that with anybody that I felt comfortable enough,
right,
to know it. So that was my marching orders from Jim. And we kept it quiet. I mean, we didn't tell anybody. There's people on here saying, "How do you know he was sick?" Because we didn't really talk too much about it. But then Jim started talking about it, and he kind of let the cat out of the bag himself.
Right.
At a couple conventions. But, I was literally about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, I was literally trying to get Jim to come on and do a live show. I said, listen, let's do one more, Jim. Let's do it. No holds barred. Don't hold nothing back. Let it all out there, kind of deal. But
that's the thing. And Jim was, you could tell he just was, losing momentum. Even though he wanted to do more, he was able to do less. but it wasn't stopping him from booking stuff and planning stuff and wanting to do stuff and signing up for stuff, because that's what he loved the most, was talking to the fans. It's what he wanted to do. And he would do shows where he was on the show floor for like an hour or two, and then he'd go back to the hotel and rest for a couple hours, and he'd come back. He loved doing it so much. He didn't want to not be there. And it wasn't because of the money. It was because of the fans.
Mm-hmm.
And,
oh yeah, I think it was Larry Stroman told me that one time something happened with the vouchers. Or it may have been Ron. With the vouchers, he didn't get his voucher in time, and he didn't have any money for the week. And he went in and told Jim. He said, "Listen, I got the voucher, but and Jim reached in his pocket and gave him all the money he had."
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim Manley says Joe Rubenstein told me Shooter always had money in his pocket, and if any creators came in and needed money to pay their bills, he pulled out his wallet and gave them what they needed.
Yep. Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, so many great memories. I mean, that's what it's all about, right? I mean, just remembering the man and the things he did, and the contributions he made across the board. In the comic book industry.
Just like I said, I mean, he was
in the vein of this story. I'd have to go back and watch it. I know it's on the one that you and I were with him, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
Probably his last time on here.
It was.
That kind of speaks to Stevie B's. It's when he was still working at DC as a kid. And I know Julie Schwartz was involved in the story, but was it Sheldon Moldenhoff or somebody like that got mad when they found out? Jim told whoever the creator was, Jim said, "Oh yeah, I'm getting $5 a page." And apparently like industry standard at that time was like $10 a page or something. And they took him with him, and they stormed into Julie Schwartz's office and said, "Julie, God damn it, it's bad enough you're hiring children. Do you have to screw them too?"
But John Romita told us a story. John Romita Jr., when he went in for a contract negotiation, he said he walked into Shooter's office and he said, "Listen, I want $25 a page, and that if you don't do that for me, I'm walking." And Jim was like, "Well, I was going to give you 50, so 25 works for me." And I asked him that question. He said 100%. He said that's exactly what happened.
Hey, Bill Morrison's here. Oh.
Hey, guys.
What's up, Morrison?
How's it going?
All right.
Just
telling some
some
stories. I was talking about the Italian restaurant with me, you, and Shooter, where I didn't say a whole lot. And you and Jim sat there and talked all night long about inkers almost entirely. And how he was almost your boss.
I don't remember you being there. Ken Carson was there.
Because I didn't say anything.
Ken Carson was there, but I don't think Santa Claus was there.
Yeah.
Good Morrison, everybody. Thank you so much. My wife will love that.
Where'd this come from?
He saw that new Fantastic Four trailer. He's trying to be like the Thing is with the beard. That's what.
Christmas is coming, buddy.
Oh no, we're just all telling our Jim stories. So if regale us with one, if you got one you can think of there, Bill, we'd love to hear it.
Well, I'm sure Ken, in talking about that night we had dinner, probably mentioned the point in the conversation where I mentioned Vince Coletta. Did you mention that, man?
I did. I only touched upon it. You could probably be a little more elaborate about it.
Well, I didn't know how close Jim and Vince were, and I didn't know that Jim was a staunch defender of Vinny's reputation. So I said something about him erasing all of Kirby's background lines. And Jim got really hot. He was upset, and I said, "Well," and this is true. I said, "I didn't say I said that. I said I heard that."
And then he told us a story how he was almost your boss.
Yes, we did at Fan Expo. They would put us on panels together. So we did, I think maybe 3 or 4 times we did what they called the editor in chief, or I think it was called Don't Call Me Chief.
Yeah, that was a great panel. It got
It was
lots
Jim and
of
I. Yeah, it was amazing. Jim and I talking about being editors in chief, and I already knew what his job was kind of like, but from listening to him talk about it, he went first the first time we did it, and it just struck me how different our jobs were, even though we had the same title. What Bongo is such a small company compared to Marvel that it was very different. My job as editor in chief didn't compare to what Jim did, because Jim was striking deals, and he was the boss of a lot of things that I didn't have control over at Bongo. I was more just over creative matters, and we kind of made that a part of the panel. So Jim would talk about his job as an editor, and then I would talk about what it was like for me. And we kind of made a point of letting the audience know that, the titles don't always mean the same thing at different companies. It's like a producer on a film or TV project. That can mean a lot of things. Sometimes a producer is really just the writer, and the writer has their agent get them a producer credit
Right.
in lieu of maybe a raise,
Yeah.
But sometimes a producer is the person who puts money into it, and they're a backer. So that title can mean a lot of different things. And we kind of pointed out that editor in chief is the same thing. It doesn't always mean the same. But we had a lot of fun. There were a couple of times where I cracked Jim up, and that was really fun. That felt good.
Larry Hama. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's right. I was trying to remember what it was. Say it again.
Somebody, the moderator said Larry Hama or something like that,
Yeah.
and Jim said it's Hama.
Yeah.
And then fast forward to the interviewing Billy says something about Futurama. Bill says it's Futurama.
Yeah.
Something like
We call it Futurama. It's Futurama.
Exactly.
that panel was a brainchild of Kevin Boyd, and I remember the first time he did it. I think Bill was even like, "Oh my God, what are we going to talk about and stuff?" And Jim was even like, "What is this about?" And I was like, "I don't know, you guys are." And afterwards, they both were like, "Wow, that was a lot of fun." And I think they did it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. And Kevin said it was one of the most well-received panels that they were doing at the time. It was a lot of fun. And anytime, Bill and Jim were going to, at a Fan Expo show, they would schedule that panel specifically for those two. Don't Call Me Chief. That was the title.
One of the other things that Jim always talked about, well, we kind of talked about it together, Jim would bring it up, was the fact that he almost was the editor of Simpsons comics.
Right.
Because he was working with Welsh Publishing, and they were the ones that did the Simpsons Illustrated magazine. And when we did Simpsons Comics and Stories, it was actually the annual of the magazine. It wasn't, it was legitimately a comic, but it was sort of the magazine in disguise. Just an all comics version of the magazine, or an annual issue. And he was, I don't remember all the details, but he was poised to basically produce Simpsons comics for Welsh, in which case I was already doing freelance for the Simpsons Illustrated, so I probably would have been working under Jim with him as my editor. But when it ended up happening was Matt Groening, on the success of Simpsons Comics and Stories, Matt decided, I've always wanted to start my own comic book company, and I was never really sure if there was an appetite for Simpsons comics, but this book tells me that there is. So I'm going to pull the trigger and start my own company.
Yeah. So never
So
to be.
Yeah, that was what. So that was the thing that sort of eliminated Jim from the mix. But
Right. Yeah. I see you have a couple other pictures, don't you, Ken? Loaded up there, a couple things, just in case. Just throw some up there. But we didn't get a lot, and I never got any. This was probably the only picture I've got of me and Jim, with John Beatty there.
Terrific.
All of us hanging out, and then yeah, this is a friend of the program, Mr. Bill Cox. He was like, oh my, he didn't have his, for some reason he didn't have his camera handy. I was like, well, I'll get your picture with Jim.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I want to hit some of these comments real quick. Jason,
yeah.
this was a really good one. You were a good friend to him, Ken. Cancer is something this year my family has received diagnosis regarding, and it's something only certain people get told about. That's a lot of trust he put in you. Also, Jeff says 4C Comics a few years ago, you got my Secret Wars #1 and Superman 199 signed by Jim. It meant a lot to me then. It means even more now. Thank you. And then Stevie B's House of Collectibles. I know the New Universe failed, but would you consider the Star Comics imprint a success as it launched under Jim?
that and Valiant too. I mean, it wasn't like Marvel was just where, DC's where his writing started, but his editor and role, went on and on after Marvel, into several different things.
And writing and stuff like that. He was developing a Netflix series. I don't know what's going to happen with that. That's a done deal. He was working. He had told me, I'm not going to reveal what that's about, but I mean, I knew what it was all about.
Right.
If it ever gets made, hopefully it's going to be fantastic. I think he wrote 2 seasons of it. The last time I talked to him, he said he had 2 seasons finished.
Wow.
So who knows if they're going to develop that at this point. I know he got to go to. I think he went to the premiere of She-Hulk. Marvel actually invited him out for the world premiere of the She-Hulk show when it started. So as much as he thought he was, scorched earth, as he often said, he was starting to get some. They were starting to bring him back into the fold, and I'm sure if he would have been around when Secret Wars comes out, hopefully they would have rolled out the red carpet for the guy.
Hopefully he'll have an honorable mention in that, not just another one of the credits, but
he should for sure. But I mean, so many things. I mean, comic creation wise, I mean, what characters did he create? I mean, he brought so many characters into the lexicon of comics that are still there today. His footprint is definitely pretty big in the comics world.
And like I said, just to see how he touched you, all you got to do is just get on Facebook. Anybody who is out, I mean, it is just flooded. I have not seen this since Stan passed, the amount of accolades and people recognizing that he's not around anymore.
Yeah, at Heroes, we used to set up at Heroes. If anybody ever went to Heroes and saw us, 4C has a booth, and then he would be next to us in a different aisle. But the reason why is because, like Jeff was saying, he didn't like the fact that there was stuff being sold. So, when he was with us, we would do that. But at Heroes, we were in a separate island, and this year
we brought a bunch of stuff with us to this past Heroes because we didn't know he wasn't.
This year we were getting ready for Heroes. I was just about done packing the car and stuff, and I happened to see like a print box, like in one of the rooms that was, I was like, "What is that?" I opened up and it's full of Jim Shooter prints, all signed by him. Because at Hershey, I had him sign all the prints I had. I brought them the Heroes. If anybody was looking for Jim, I told Brittany, I said, if anybody's looking for Jim, I have these prints over here. They can kind of, maybe give them something other than, walking out of here with nothing.
Right.
Because, but, so it's just one of those things, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. it's like I said, I knew it was coming. I just knew. Bill and I had talked about this at Heroes. I was like,
Yeah.
I got a feeling, man. I got a feeling
Yeah.
because the family just became very distant. They weren't answering phone calls anymore. They weren't picking up for anybody. So it sounded to me like he was. It was that part of the family circling around and getting ready and stuff. And apparently, I was hoping he was going to make it to maybe to the fall or something like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly when I saw him a few weeks ago in Virginia. He didn't look
My
very
phone is
well.
loading, by the way, as you can tell. I finally silenced.
But I was hoping for at least a few more months. But yeah, I mean,
yeah,
no,
yeah.
well,
Hey, listen, we were all fortunate to have met him. We, like I said, we got to spend time with him and break bread with him a lot of times, and just hang out with him at conventions and listen to those stories as many times as I heard some of the stories over and over and over again. I'd love to hear them one more time.
Yeah. The one that I remember the most for some reason is he was talking about, I think it was when he first got his big position at Marvel as editor-in-chief or whatever the official title was. And he was working late and he went out into the main part of the office where there's cubicles and stuff. And there was cleaning person putting putting stuff into a bag. I guess the bag was like a big trash bag that was kind of see-through. And it was at the receptionist's desk, I think. And there were all these empty envelopes with handwritten addresses. And he said, "Hang on, let me look at that." And so he looked at the bag, opened it up, and it's all full of these empty envelopes from people who had sent in subscriptions, who'd sent cash in for subscription money. And I don't know how he realized it, but I can't remember, but he realized that the receptionist had been pocketing the cash, like taking the checks and, processing those through for subscriptions, but just pocketing the cash. And then those people weren't getting subscriptions. They were just, I guess assuming their letter was lost in the mail. So he very quietly let the person go. Like he didn't make a big deal out of it, even though he could have called the police. And I'm fuzzy on the details, but I know he had proof that she had been, stealing the money. And I always thought that was really cool of him,
Mm-hmm.
Like he could have made a big deal out of it and called the cops and, probably would have sent her to jail. But he just took care of it quietly. And some people might say that was the wrong way to do it, that she should have been punished for what she did. But he just kind of felt like, well, losing a job like this is punishment enough.
right. And the one that always sticks out with me, and I forgive me, but I forget the full range of the story. But he was at a show and he was talking to somebody and he was just having a conversation with somebody. And I forget if they were at the news or what they were. And these people kept coming up to him and asking him for an autograph and asking for this and that. And the person was like, "Excuse me, but who are you?" He goes, who are you? Are you like a big deal? And he goes, "In this room? Yeah. Out there." And so he knew that he was, in his realm, in a room full of comic fans, that he was a very big deal. But he also knew his place in the world. And he's like, outside these doors, no, I'm nobody.
Yeah.
But inside here, yeah, I guess I'm a big deal. And yeah, and he was it's a big deal to us.
Yeah. And he was, it seems that he was 6'7", I think. He was just a tall guy. I mean, he had a great presence about him. But he was genuine to his fans. He couldn't be more. He couldn't be nicer. He couldn't do enough for them. We used to have this thing where we charge for autographs, and he would say to me, "Oh, look over there." you know, and that meant he was going to be giving away some autographs or something
Yeah.
like that.
And then we would do, and we'd do that. We'd do like I'd somebody come up and we'd charge, whatever we charged for autographs, and they'd bring the entire run of Secret Wars, over, and I'd be like, what do you got there? 12? And I was like, and I'd be like, no, I was like, he's got 10, right, Jim? He's like, oh yeah, he's got 10. And I was like, okay, there you go. And just give him the other 2. Or one person would come up with like one book, and they would just look like, and it was obviously like a beat up, just something they just wanted him, and do that. And I'd be like, Jim, I didn't see anything. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And we just give it to the guy, and then you had to make people happy, and he loved to do that. And like I said, he would, if he could have just found a way to be able to come to the shows like he used to, when they used to, when the shows would pay people to come in, and when Marvel would pay, to bring you to shows, he would have come for free. He wouldn't have, he didn't need the money. He just, but once, he couldn't pay, he wasn't going to pay out of pocket for a hotel room and a car and all that. So, he ended up working with the facilitators like us that were able to bring him to shows and make it worth everybody's while and make the fans happy. So we were just happy to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously, like I said, never worked with him creatively, but I feel I was, and maybe that's for the best, because I know there are people who worked with him who don't like him because he was pretty tough, and he had his way of doing things and his opinions about how things should be done, and that ruffled some feathers. But I feel fortunate that I got to hang out with him. I got to be on panels with him. Got to go to dinner with him, and call him my friend. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Bill. After that dinner, Bill and I were talking about starting a comic book company, and I said to Bill, let's see if Shooter wants to join us. So we were the next day at the convention. I saw Jim sitting, because Jim always got to the convention early. He was if the convention opened at 9, he was there at 8:30. He was ready to go. So he's sitting at the table all by himself. And I said to Bill, I'm gonna go over and talk to Jim. Bill's like, no, don't. I'm like, why not? And I said to Jim, Bill Morrison and I are talking about starting a comic book company. Would you be interested? He goes, yes, I would. All right. And we didn't get real far with it.
That's pretty incredible, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To have him just answer that quickly.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, yes, I would.
And have it not be no.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. We didn't go anywhere with it, though. We were all too busy to get anything.
Well,
done.
yes, and then with his illness progressing and stuff, it just stuff
Yeah, it
happened.
wasn't long after that.
But now,
yeah. But he will be missed. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whodad says, I met Jim in New Orleans at a small con. He was so nice and was so happy to talk to people. Did you ever see Jim at a New Orleans Comic-Con there, Ken?
Once.
A bigger one, though. Not a small one.
Not a small one. No.
No. There's a lot of fireworks at that show, I remember.
I should tell that story.
Well,
Maybe not.
let's save it for
Maybe.
we'll save it for when somebody else passes. It'll be all right.
Murdoch says Epic Comics was a success for sure. Spinner Rack Rick says, oh, hell yeah, some great stuff came out of Epic.
Yeah.
Oh,
But,
yeah.
Yeah.
I used to buy Epic. I remember
Yeah.
that. There were some great stories, great runs of like serialized stories, as I recall. Isn't that how Epic worked? They had like Bernie Wrightson, and he would do like a run of 4 issues or something like that
Mhm.
with one story.
We may have done the first and only sketch op with Jim Shooter. Do you remember?
Yeah.
that?
We did. We did. Yeah, we did some schemes. That's what a lot of people don't know about Jim. And it was that when he did those, when he was 13 and he was sending in doing those Legion stories, he would draw panels out for the artists. So they, not only did they have the story and the words, but he'd show them what was going to be happening. And it basically would rough out the story in panels. And he wasn't a bad artist either. I mean, he wasn't, once again, he wasn't going to be drawing any comics, regularly, but he could tell stories, not just with his words, but he saw it and how it looked
Well,
Yeah, we-
I wouldn't say that, because if he was 13, I mean, I've seen some of Jim's drawings, and I feel that if he had gone in that direction rather than writing, or had picked up,
Sure.
writing and drawing together, doing both, and honed that, I think he could have definitely. I mean, I think I look at the stuff that I draw, and sometimes I'm like, I should stick to writing, maybe.
Before he
But-
came on, though, I was telling how he used to teach. I mean, the way he talked about people, that when he did like portfolio reviews and stuff, and how I learned from him. He said if you look at a panel, you look at a page. What's the story? What's it telling you? There's no words on it. What's it saying?
Yeah.
So he definitely had an eye for that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it's a visual medium, and a lot of artists agree that you should be able to look at a page with no word balloons and be able to figure out what's going on.
Mhm.
And then
Look
the
at
word
how-
balloons and the caption boxes just it's like frosting on the cake.
Look how serious he treated that toaster drawing
Oh yeah.
for the stray toasters guy.
Uh-huh.
He
Yeah.
drew his
Oh my
mother's toaster.
And it was fantastic.
Yeah, I wish we had. We listen. We have a show. Probably have a show tomorrow night. We'll see if we can find some more of the stuff and some of the classic pictures and the sketches and the things to throw up there. Maybe we'll do a little montage or something. But yeah, when we did that sketch op with him, he took it serious. I mean, he really serious.
You know how many people would have phoned in a drawing of a toaster and not like. I mean, his looked like from the instruction manual
Yeah.
or something of a toaster.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, he did like an antique toaster, and he did it like
Yeah, it was
very
one of those,
well
like-
detailed. Yeah,
Not just an antique toaster, his mother's toaster.
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
What happened to that toaster guy?
He's out
I
there.
don't know. I
somewhere.
haven't seen him in a long time, but
A while since
I remember.
anyways,
I remember, like
Well,
he
they
got
told
he got his money's worth on the Jim Shooter toaster.
Every time I did a commission list, I'd get an email from you. Go, you know what I'm going to ask? I'm like, do you really want me to ask the creator to draw a freaking toaster? Seriously? That's
People
you
like
want?
what they like. But yeah. But thanks everybody for joining us tonight. We just wanted to give everyone sort of a place where they could, listen to some stories and tell some stories about Jim. And like I said, we did several live shows with him. If you want to know, more from watching us talk to him, please, go back and find some of those shows. There's a show called Comic Tropes on YouTube that did a very nice, both sides view of a very like you're going to hear from us. We were his friends, but if you want to hear from somebody who maybe wasn't his friend, he did a very nice episode on Jim from just a completely outside point of view. But there's stories and books and all kinds of blogs. You can find everything you need to know about him. But it never hurts to look him up because, like I said, he is part of this industry and he was a huge part of my childhood and our lives. So. Yeah, we just wanted to come out and say our piece and give them a little remembrance and, share it with the 4C faithful because that's what we do because you guys are our family as much as anybody. So,
And Jim was 4C. He was part of us. We worked with him for a long time, and like I said, he was a friend for sure. And he'll be missed. But we're gonna carry on his legacy as long as we can.
Yeah.
Make sure we always sing his praises whenever his name comes up. And because I didn't know that the Jim that other people talk about. I only knew the guy that I knew. And,
Right.
I thought he was great.
yeah. And we have a ton of those prints that he signed and we'll see if we can do something fun with them. If we do them as, if we bring them to shows and do them as
And now
giveaways.
I have these prints. I don't know what the frig to do with them now.
Yeah, well, like I said, we'll just take them with us. And somebody, maybe somebody out there never got something autographed by Jim. Well, we've
Stop
got.
giving my shit away, Jeff.
I like to give your shit away. It's better than giving my shit away. But we'll see if we can do something. But yeah, thank you guys all for joining us on a Monday and an impromptu show. Yeah,
Murdoch, yeah, for better or worse, Jim Shooter was probably the single most important person in comics in the late 70s to the mid to late 80s.
Yeah, he changed things. He changed things for a lot of. He did a lot of good things. Like I said, had Medicare, he got royalties for guys. He, did got guys there. Ron Wilson loved Jim.
And he
Because-
loved Ron. Ron was his go-to guy. He said whenever I needed something done, I went to Ron Wilson.
Yeah.
And we got, you have one more picture. I think I sent you that you can throw up there. I took this one at MegaCon a couple of years ago.
Do I have that picture? Did it upload?
Did it upload? Did you get it?
Uploaded. Hold on one second.
This will be, well, just to show this one off. But yeah, we were lucky enough to work with Ron, obviously, but to get them together and hear those stories and to hear stories that we cannot tell any of you.
Oh God, Ron Wilson told us a story.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yep, that is not fit for public airwaves, unfortunately. But
Oh man.
Ken will write a book one day. You'll get all these stories.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Who knows?
Oh,
1 second. Let me see if I can.
no, yeah. If you can get it up there, you can. If you can't, that's all right.
No, I got it. I just got it.
Thank you for joining us, Bill. I know it was sort of like out of nowhere. We just sort of threw this.
Yeah,
thing together.
I hadn't even heard the news until I saw Ken's text, and he just said, "We're having an impromptu show talking about Jim," and I was like, "What happened to Jim?"
Yeah. There you go.
I found out Becker texted me. He said, sorry to hear about Jim passing away. And I was like, oh, I hadn't heard.
Yeah.
So I instantly Googled it to make sure
I've
it
been
wasn't
away
fake news.
from the Facebook all day, so
Yeah. It was,
Hey, that's good advice for us all.
I was watching the Titan stuff. That goofball of Ocean Gate who went to the Titanic and became part of the
Oh yeah.
So I was enthralled in that, angry at that son of a bitch.
oh,
Kind of reminded me of the country. I said, this is what Trump's doing to the country right now. Did I say that out loud?
That's a whole other show.
Or Jim Shooter. I'm just saying whatever I want.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. In honor of Jim Shooter, everybody go out in your public life and just say the thing that you always wanted to say. Just say it. Be more like Jim.
And then I got fired.
But thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and we'll see. I think we're here tomorrow night. I'm not positive. You never know.
We'll do a
But
show tomorrow night.
we got to do a Heroes wrap up. We got to tell you guys all the fun stuff that happened last weekend, and tell you all the wonderful stories. We're not going to do that tonight, but we'll regale you with everything. I got to find out about how Ken and Bill's show went, because they were on a completely different island than I was last week. So I don't know. I barely got to see two of them. We worked the same table for 3 days, and I think I saw them 4 times.
yeah, we were on the same island, but you were on the other side of it.
Yeah.
We were on Island of Relevancy.
How was your
Only
con?
time-
Good. How was your con?
I only saw that side of the island when I went to the men's room.
Yeah. Or after where they broke down we broke everything down, and it was just a big empty space.
Yeah, then you can see, hey, look at that.
Yeah. But thank you guys so much, and we will see you tomorrow night. So have a great evening, and once again, rest in peace to our wonderful friend, Mr. Jim Shooter. Somewhere he's writing some new stories, and they're probably pretty good ones.
I bet.